Good morning, Year 5. I hope you're all well. This week I am asking you to write fractions as equivalent decimals and percentages. And well done to those of you who have already had a go at this. This is our last week on fractions. We're going to move on to a different topic next week. So I really want you to use your sapphire power and your grit power to continue with your fractions learning and do the best that you can. I really hope this video helps. And then after this is done, I would love for you to have a go at doing your maths task for today. Good luck. See you soon.
Okay, so let's look at how we can write equivalent fractions, decimals and percentages. Now we see fractions, decimals and percentages in many different parts of our everyday lives. We see it in our cars, especially the adults who are driving will see this icon. This tells us how much petrol we have. We may see it on battery icons on our mobile devices or our tablets. We may see fractions or percentages on things like this, which show us how far we have to go until we reach our goal. You may see something similar when looking at fundraising pages. We always see it in things like this. We can see from this glass that it is half empty, or you may say it's half full. We even see it in school, and we see it in many different places, like on a number line, which shows, in this particular example, that it is increasing in quarters. We see fractions in our diet with what we eat. If we were to buy a pizza for our family, or maybe even for our friends, if there was 4 of us, we would want to divide the pizza equally so we all have the same amount. If there were 4 apples in the fruit bowl and you took one to eat as a snack, you'd be eating 1 out of those 4 apples, which we would write like this, 1/4. We use fractions, decimals and percentages when dealing with money. Here we can see some coins on a £5 and £10 note. So if I were to take the 50p, for example, I would say this is 10% of £5. Now, we need 10 tens to make 100. Remember, percentages are always out of 100. So therefore, we could say we would need 10 50p's in order to have £5. Or we could say that 50p is 1/10 of £5. This means that if we had 10 50p's, we would have £5. We also see signs like this quite a lot when we go shopping. Up to 50% off, buy one get one half price sale. So when we go shopping, we know we're going to get a discount. We know the price has been reduced. That's what a sale is. However, we need to know things like 50% equals 1/2, 75% equals 3/4. Then we can try and work out before we get to the till how much of a saving we're going to make. Now, if we were to buy a pair of trousers for £20 and I saw that there was a half price sale, I know that would involve me dividing by 2. So I can work out that my trousers are now going to cost me half of £20, which is £10. It helps us to budget and to identify if we can afford those trousers before we get to the cash point. So here are some different ways we can show 92p. We could use 100 square. This shows us that it's very close to being completely shaded. So 92p is a large fraction of 100. We would write it like this, 92 out of 100, which is equivalent to 92%. Other ways we could show this are through diagrams, like these, where you can see I have separated our whole rectangle into 92 hundredths and shaded them in.
So this week we are looking at writing fractions as decimals and even percentages for those of you who are going to have a go at challenging yourselves. So you may be asked to write fractions such as 30 out of 100 as an equivalent decimal or a percentage. Now, I want you to try and imagine and see if you can remember us talking about this in class, that 100 is going to be treated as our whole amount. If we look at the word percentages, it starts with percent and it literally means for every 100. Cent can mean 100 if you think of a century, that's 100 years. In America, they have 100 cents to the dollar, which is like our pence and pound. We have 100 pence to our pound. So cent is associated with 100. So it literally means 30 out of 100. Now, if we were going to write that as a percent, it's quite easy to do because our denominator is 100. So we would say that 30 out of 100 is 30%. However, if the denominator is not out of 100, this makes it a little bit trickier, and we'll look at that later. If I wanted to write 30 out of 100 as a decimal, I would need to do 30 divided by 100. This means that out of 100 possible ones, I have 30. So imagine you had 100 questions in your test and you got 30 of them right. There's 70 that we got wrong. If there's 100 sweets in the jar and you pull out 30, there's 70 sweets still in the jar. So you haven't got the whole amount. We have 30 out of 100, which is 30%. So one way we would do this is through division. If you think of your place value grids, if I draw one very quickly here, we have our hundreds, our tens and our ones. And then we would have our decimal points, our tenths and our hundredths. So if we think about where 30 would go on this scale, we could say that 30 would be written here because 30 is 3 tens. So we'd have 3 in our tens column and we have no ones. And we're dividing by 100, so our digits are moving 2 places to the right. So our 0 would divide by 10 and then divide by 100 and it would go in here. Our 3 would also move 2 places to the right. It would divide by 10 to make 3 and then divide by 10 again. So our 3 would now go here. So as you can see, our decimal point always lives in the column between the ones and the tenths. We could fill our ones column with a 0 as a placeholder. And we then have 0.3 or 0.30, as we know that in decimal numbers, we don't have to write this 0. So we could say that 30 out of 100 is the same as 0.3 or 0.30. And that's how we're going to write our fractions as decimals and percentages. So sometimes our denominator is 100, and that makes it really easy to turn into decimals and percentages. It makes it really easy for us to write the equivalent decimal percentage. However, as we know, we're not always that lucky, and we don't always get given fractions where 100 sits in our denominator space. Sometimes we get fractions that look like this, and we have to write them as decimals or percentages. Well, how do we do that? Well, the one rule that you need to remember is that it's so easy to write them as decimals and percentages when our denominator is 100. So let's find equivalent fractions where the denominator is 100. So let's start with 7 tenths. We have 7 out of 10 here, and we are asked to write that as a decimal. So what do we need to do to our denominator to make it 100? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to times it by 10. If I had 7 tenths 10 times, I would have an amount out of 100. Now, what do I need to do to my numerator to make my fraction equivalent? That's right, I need to times this by 10 too. 7 times 10 is 70. So this amount here is worth the same as this amount here. Can I now write this as a percentage? Percent means out of 100. How many out of 100 do I have? 70. Now, as a decimal, let's imagine 1 is the whole amount. Do I have a whole amount, which is 100? No, I don't have a whole amount. So because I don't have a whole amount, I always start with a 0. Because I have less than my total, I have less than a whole. So I don't have a whole. So I have a 0 point, and then I look at my numerator. And I could write 0.7 or 0.70. Let's have a look at this one up here. This is 5 out of 20. I'm just going to rub this out and write it underneath here, so I have some space. 5/20. Now what I need to do is I need to make my denominator 100 to make it easy to write as a percentage. So what do I need to multiply my denominator by to make it 100? I need to do my 20 times table. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. I need to multiply by 5 to make it 100. So to make the fraction equivalent, I need to multiply my numerator by, well done, 5. I now need to do this calculation. 5 times 5, which is 25. So now I know that this fraction is equivalent to this fraction. And I can say that this is 25%. And I can say that I don't have a whole. I didn't get my whole 100 questions right. I didn't get all the 100 sweets out of the jar. So I didn't get the whole amount. So I'm going to start with a 0. And then I look at my numerator, which is 2, 5. I hope that has helped you a little bit with today's maths task. And I would like you to have a go at the questions that I have set. The answers are included so you can check your work at the end.